Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome back again. We're going to carry on, of course, as we have been doing. And we're now going to look at a sutta called the Upakilesa Sutta. And the reason for this choice of sutta is because it fills in a number of the blanks that we haven't really covered yet. So far we have looked quite carefully at the idea, the process of meditation in a certain perspective, from the perspective of Anapanasati. And this particular sutta, it fills in some of the higher aspects of the path, the higher aspects of Anapanasati, how to deal with things like nimittas, lights in the mind, and these kind of things. And it has a kind of long and very interesting discussion about this. So we'll look at that, and this is especially, of course, when your meditation starts to go really well, and you're really enjoying it, these things start to become quite significant and interesting here. So that is one part of the sutta. Another part of the sutta which is interesting is that it talks a little bit about the foundations for the practice. What is it that makes meditation possible in the first place, right? And how to develop those qualities. And another third part of this particular sutta, which I also find very interesting, is that we see the Buddha here, how he deals with the monks, the engagement with the monks. And that gives us a feeling for the Buddha as a person. And I always found this very interesting, because if we're going to do Buddhanusati, trying to reflect on the Buddha's qualities, it is important to get a feeling for who the Buddha was as a person. This is one thing that comes out quite well, I think, in this sutta. Very often the Buddha is not really talked about very much. He's kind of, he does all the talking, but not so much about the Buddha, except when he talks about his own life. But here we see the Buddha engaging with the other monks. So, Upakilesa Sutta. So let's just get started and see how this goes. And as always, we will discuss all the details as we go along here. So this is how it begins. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Kosambi in Gosita's monastery, the Gosita Rama. Now at that time, the mendicants of Kosambi were arguing, quarreling, and disputing, continuing wounding each other with barbed words. So this is already an interesting starting point. This is in Kosambi. Kosambi is one of the 6 great cities of ancient India. They're called the Mahanagaras. And these are mentioned in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Kosambi is one of them. You have Savatthi, you have Rajagaha, you have Vesali, you have Varanasi, and you have Champa, I think. I think these are the 6 main cities at that time. And what is interesting about these main cities, and this is quite interesting for historical purposes and to get a feeling for ancient India, is that there has been archaeological excavations done of Kosambi. And when you look at those archaeological excavations, you can see the ancient contours of the city. They have these ramparts, these big mounds of earth that kind of delimit the city, so to speak. And when you see that, you realize that actually, even though these were the 6 great cities of that time period, they were quite humble. Yeah, they weren't that large. And that is useful to know, because then when you later on you read about the life of the Buddha, and that life of the Buddha is expanded on in the Jataka Nidana, Jataka Nidana, the background story to the Jataka collection. That has a long section, about 100 pages, all about the life of the Buddha and the Buddha to be the Bodhisattva. And when you read those stories, it's good to have a reality check, because some of those stories are exaggerated. They're not actually what really happened at the time. So, for example, Kapilavastu, the capital city of the Sakyans, is there described as being very large and very prosperous and full of people, and it sounds like this enormous place. when you read about it there. But then when you see the reality on the ground, actually it was very humble. And those stories are not always reliable. They tend to be exaggerated. So if you want to understand the life of the Buddha, if you want to understand that time, that place and time, what it was like, try to get your information from the suttas. The suttas are the most reliable source for these things. And the later things tend often to be a bit exaggerated and blown out of proportion. So this is why it can be nice to see archaeological excavations as well, because they add to our picture of what happened at that time. So this is Go-Sitta's monastery, and that means that Go-Sitta was the donor of the monastery. And so this would have been outside the city, probably a little bit like the Jetavana in Savatthi. Now, at that time, the monks in Kosambi, they were arguing, quarreling, and disputing, continually wounding each other with barbed words. Barbed words are mukha, satta. Satta is a knife, mukha is mouth, the knives of the mouth. Yeah, it's a kind of nice idea of trading insults, or I don't know to what they were doing, but they were certainly not very kind to each other. And this also, I think, is very interesting, because very often in the Dhamma we think of the time of the Buddha as a very special time. At that time everyone was enlightened, and you almost get that feeling when you read the suttas. You read the suttas, everything is very inspiring. You hear about these extraordinary people, extraordinary monastics, like the great monastics at that time. Some of them were monks, there were some nuns also mentioned in the suttas. And they're all super inspiring here. But of course, the reality is that the Sangha at that time, people at that time, were no different from what they are now. People are just people. So sometimes it's good to get a reality check. And this gives you that reality check again. You know that people are essentially the same. And so this is important. Otherwise, we might feel inferior. Yeah, we might feel, in those days everyone was so great. Now everything has gone in decline. Yeah, we are like the, the kind of dodgy brothers of these ancient sages. But that is actually not the case. And this is also what you see in the Vinaya Pitaka. This is a rare example from the suttas. In the suttas you don't normally see this. But in the Vinaya Pitaka, the whole breadth of humanity really comes out. All the defilements are on full display in the suttas, in the Vinaya Pitaka. And that's kind of reassuring. It means that people have always been the same. Enlightenment, awakening, the Aryan stages are just as available today as they were 2,500 years ago. The Noble Eightfold Path is here. There are still Aryans in the world. I don't have any doubt about that myself, having met so many inspiring people in my life. And so the path is still open. And sometimes if we say that the path is no longer available, that the Aryans are kind of died out, it becomes an excuse for not practicing. And it's very easy and very kind of enticing to take up those excuses, because then you can chillax more. But it is a very bad idea, because you're not taking up the marvelous opportunity that is here to create a better existence for yourself and taking this path, making an end of all of these problems that we have in the human realm. So monks were arguing, and of course this has always been the case, and this is the case also in the present day. We try to avoid arguing, but sometimes it just happens, because monks are human beings like everyone else, and sometimes you just go wrong. We haven't had any arguments here yet. We've had some nice discussions with the monks, which I really appreciate. It's nice too, because monks usually have a kind of nice appreciation of the Dhamma, and also the nuns as well, for that matter. But we haven't really been having any fist fights yet with the monks, so I'm very glad to be able to announce that to everyone. Hopefully it will remain so for the rest of this retreat. So, okay. Then a mendicant went up to the Buddha, bowed and stood to one side, and told him what was happening, adding, "Please, sir, go to those mendicants out of compassion." The Buddha consented with silence. Then the Buddha went up to those mendicants and said, "Enough, mendicants, stop arguing, quarreling, and disputing." So we have some mendicants, there's still some monks, of course, who have a bit of sense. They understand that all the arguing and disputing are a problem, and so they seek help from the highest authority. In those days, you could go to the Buddha. You could say, please, please, Venerable Sir, help us out. Everyone is arguing, yeah? And of course, if we had the Buddha available now, we probably would do the same. We would say, please come and help us. Our defilements are so strong, we don't know what to do with ourselves. And when that happens, when you ask the Buddha to come, then surely the Buddha will sort everything out, right? The Buddha is super duper powerful. He understands the defilements of human beings. If you ask him to intervene, then surely no more problem, right? Wrong. It's not as simple as that. And this shows kind of I would not say stupidity, the silliness, the delusion of human beings. That even the Buddha sometimes is not powerful enough to really help out in these kind of situations. So we'll see that in a second. But it starts off, one little interesting point here, which I always have found interesting. You find this in the Suttas all the time. When you ask the Buddha to come and to help out, you will notice how you ask. There's a particular way of phrasing it. And the phrasing is always, please come out of compassion. Because remember, when the Buddha starts his teaching career, everything the Buddha does, he starts teaching because he has compassion for the world. He knows he has a solution to the human predicament, to human suffering. So because he knows that, of course, compassion arises, and he always acts out of compassion. So if you want someone like the Buddha, or if you want someone who is like an Aryan, anyone who's really developed on the path, if you want them to come and to do something special, like visit you, or come somewhere or do something, it's always good to ask in this particular way, because it shows that you know what motivates Aryans, the noble ones, and the Buddha specifically, to act. Please come out of compassion. We have an issue. Are you able to help out, please? It's a nice kind of little thing to reflect on. And then the Buddha, he goes up to those mendicants. He always, when people ask out of compassion, he usually will go. And he says, enough mendicants. Alang bhikkhave. And and you would think, right, if the Buddha says enough, stop arguing, quarreling, you think those monks would come to their senses. But you would think so, but of course that would not be true. So this is what happens next. When he said this, one of the mendicants said to the Buddha, wait, sir, let the Lord of the Dhamma remain passive, dwelling in blissful meditation in the present life. We will be known for this arguing, quarreling, and disputing. What do you think? Is that a good idea to say that to the Buddha? Not a very good idea. And it's fascinating, because I think it shows a number of things about how human beings work. And when we understand how human beings work, we can make sure that we don't fall into the same mistake. When you're saying this to the Buddha, it's rude, right? The Buddha is kind of the leader of everyone. The Buddha understands the Dhamma. And to tell him, please don't get involved. That's basically what he's saying. Venerable Sir, please don't get involved. Just enjoy yourself in meditation. We will kind of continue arguing and quarreling. It's rude. That's the first thing. How can it be that people are rude to the Buddha? And the answer is very often the stupidity of crowds. When you become a crowd and everyone is kind of arguing, everyone is taking sides, you become part of a group. And when you become part of a group, we tend to become very stupid, because we follow along with the group. We stop thinking for ourselves. And you see this in the world. Sometimes you see people coming together in a mob, and everyone is shouting, everyone is screaming, everyone is pushing the other ones along. No one is thinking independently anymore. This is the danger of crowds. Crowds have this psychological effect on human beings that make us stupid. And I think this is what is happening here. If this was an individual monk, he would never say anything like this to the Buddha. It is because he's part of a stupid crowd. That's why this is happening here. So please don't fall into the same trap. Please don't allow yourself to be pushed along by the crowds of the world. Always stand your ground. Always think for yourself. Is this right or is it wrong? Never think that the crowd knows what is right. Crowds tend to be stupid. Yeah, the majority of people in the world do not have right view. It is only a small minority in the world who have right view. So try to have that right view. Try to pull back. Realize that very often the crowd, the majority will often be wrong, and you have to stand your ground against that majority very often. It is difficult to stand on the ground against the majority, but if you want to have real integrity, if you want to have real morality in your life, if you want to act in the right way, it is the only way to do it. And I think some of the greatest heroes in history have been people who have stood out, who have said, no, I want to do things differently. One of those greatest heroes, the greatest hero perhaps in history, is the Buddha himself. The Buddha did not follow along the norms of ancient Indian society. He went against the prevailing wisdom of the Brahmanical tradition at the time, and he said, no, I'm going to think for myself. He went to some of the greatest teachers like Alara Kalama and Udakaramaputra, and he said, no, they don't really understand. And then he went completely by himself, rejecting everything else around him. He was only one person against the whole world, and then he found the solution. So sometimes we need to take a little bit of that courage from the Buddha, to dare to stand the ground when we know something is right, not allow ourselves to be pulled along by the crowd in this way. And these are the kind of the heroes of our society. And sometimes in contemporary society, they get a lot of trouble. But the future generations will remember these people as the leaders who brought the world forward in a positive way. So, this is what he says. And then a second time and a third time, the Buddha said to those mendicants, enough mendicants, stop arguing, quarreling and disputing. And for a third time that mendicant said to the Buddha, wait, sir, let the Buddha, the Lord of the Dhamma, remain passive, dwelling in blissful meditation in the present life. We will be known for this arguing, quarreling and disputing. So also the idea of blissful meditation in the present life, Ditta Dhamma Sukha Vihara, is really just another way of talking about the jhana states, the deep samadhi. And so basically saying to the Buddha, why don't you just go and meditate and we will continue the arguing here. So interesting. Another thing which is interesting about this, which is I think part of the idea of the Buddha Nusati, is to see here that the Buddha here, he appears very human in many ways, right? Imagine this interaction with this monk, and then the Buddha. And the fact that the monk speaks this way to the Buddha, it means that this monk saw the Buddha. Yes, the Buddha is a teacher, but he also saw the Buddha as an ordinary human being that you talk to in an ordinary way. He obviously didn't see the Buddha as a god or anything like that. He even dares contradicting the Buddha in this way. This is, I think, is a very important point about when we do the Buddha Nusati, that we understand the Buddha in the right way. If we think that the Buddha is more than he actually is, if you put, what I like to say, put the Buddha on the wrong kind of pedestal, the God pedestal, or the kind of the supernatural being kind of pedestal, or the Bodhisattva who practiced for 4 incalculable eon pedestal. If we put the Buddha on the wrong pedestal, we get the wrong idea of who the Buddha was, and then we interact with the Buddha in the wrong way. But if we understand the Buddha as a human being, then we can relate to the Buddha as another human being. We can ask the Buddha questions. We can meet with the Buddha as we can meet with anyone else. And we can ask questions. We can maybe even disagree sometimes and say, I don't understand. This is how please explain a bit more, or whatever it is. And when the Buddha is a human being, we know that the Buddha understands us, because the Buddha has gone through the same kind of problems that we have gone through. He has had to practice the same kind of path. And because the Buddha understands us, we can have a very useful conversation with the Buddha. But if the Buddha is something different, if the Buddha is somehow alien, if the Buddha is a god, if the Buddha is the cosmic principle, if the Buddha is the consciousness ground of all being or whatever, there is no conversation to be had really, because the Buddha is different. Does the Buddha understand us if he is kind of completely different? The path of the Buddha, does that relate to us? If the Buddha practiced this way, do we practice the same? Why would you practice the same if the Buddha is not human? So understanding the Buddha as a human being, of course, he had very powerful spiritual qualities, but the more you see of the life of the Buddha, the more you read about the Buddha, the struggles that he had, and we will see these struggles later on in this particular sutta, you realize that essentially he went through the same kind of problems that we have. Of course, once he becomes the Buddha, once he is an arahant, it is very different. But that potential of arahantship is also within us. So even then, there is a lot of similarities there. So it is interesting to notice these little things. Yeah, you can start to see who the Buddha really is. To the monks at that time, he was just a human being, one human being among many. He was obviously special, but still a human being. Okay, so next, what does the Buddha do? What are the skillful means that the Buddha uses to kind of address this particular situation? And the skillful means are as follows. Then the Buddha robed up in the morning, and taking his bowl and robe, he entered Kosambi for alms. After the meal, on the return from alms round, he set his lodgings in order. Taking his bowl and robe, he recited these verses while standing right there. So, again, very interesting, the Buddha would go on alms round, just like monks now. Or nuns now. Do the nuns also go on alms round here in Sri Lanka? Maybe? Okay. Tell me later on if you have any information on that. But the Buddha would go on alms round, which is kind of interesting. So he would just be one monk again among many monks walking for alms in the city. It's fascinating, isn't it? How would you feel if the Buddha came for alms round to your house? Would you feel a bit nervous, or would you feel kind of, oh yeah, it's just the Buddha, it's okay? How would you feel about that? It's kind of fascinating, right? It gives you, again, this perception of the Buddha, which is kind of different from how we often think about the Buddha. He would look like a monk. He would be a monk. People would treat him as a monk. Of course, they would see him as special in many ways. But still, he would also have this very human aspect to him. So then after his meal, he set his lodgings in order. Again, the Buddha would set his lodging in order. Lodging would be his kuti or wherever he was staying. So he would put things in the right place. It's a nice reminder for all monks to kind of do the right thing with your lodgings, right? The Buddha himself put his own lodging in order, which is kind of fascinating again. And what that means when you put your lodging in order, it means that you are about to depart. This is the meaning of this. So then he takes his bowl and robe and he recites these verses. But after this, he is about to depart. And this is, of course, the skillful means of the Buddha in this particular context. If no one is able to listen to you, if no one takes you seriously, you stop talking. You don't carry on trying to convince people. If they won't listen, there's no point in trying anymore. And you find this in the suttas, the kind of the highest penalty you can give someone is when you stop talking to them. There's a very, the famous monk Channa in the suttas. He was supposed to be the Buddha's charioteer before his ordination, before he became a monk. And he was a very proud person because he was so close to the Buddha. Because of his pride, he refused to listen to the other monks. He said that you should listen to me, I should not listen to you. This kind of things he would say to the other monks. So the Buddha, just before he dies, he says that the monk Channa should be given the Brahmadanda. Brahmadanda is like the highest penalty. Danda is penalty. Do you have that word in Sinhala as well? Danda? Kind of means penalty, So the highest penalty, and the highest penalty is very interesting. The highest penalty is not physical punishment, of course. We don't really do physical punishment in Buddhism. The Brahmadanda is you don't speak to him. And even if he asks you questions, you don't really speak back. Yeah? And that worked. Yeah? As soon as no one would really talk to Channa anymore, he kind of realized something was dangerous. Yeah? Something was wrong. Yeah? So this idea, when no one listens to you, then to withdraw and allow people to reflect on their actions is often very powerful. And this is what the Buddha does in this particular case. If no one is listening, stop trying to convince them, let them be. It becomes their problem at that particular point. And then, before he departs, the Buddha expresses these particular verses that we're coming to now. And these verses that we're coming to now are some of the most famous verses in Buddhism. These verses are found here in the Upakilesa Sutta. They're found in the Dhammapada, not all of them, but most of them. They're also found in the Vinaya Pitaka. This story is very famous because of the arguing and the quarreling of the monks. It becomes a story in the Vinaya Pitaka on how to resolve disputes in the monastic community. It's in the Kusambhaka Khandaka, the 10th Khandaka in the Vinaya Pitaka. And it is very much the same kind of storyline that follows there with all the verses and these kind of things. So this is a very well-known story because it is found in so many different places in the suttas and also in the Vinaya. This sutta is also another version of these three monks coming together. These three monks that we're going to see later on in the sutta are also found elsewhere in the suttas as well, in the same kind of place. So all of this is kind of related to each other here. So let's have a look at these famous verses. There's a reason why they're famous, because they're actually quite profound and very useful to reflect on. So this is how they go. When many voices shout at once, no one thinks that they are a fool. While the Sangha is being split, none thought another to be better. Dolts pretending to be astute, they talk the words right out of bounds, they blab at will, their mouths agape, and no one knows what leads them on. They abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those who bear such a grudge, hatred never ends. They abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those who bear no such grudge, hatred has an end. For never is hatred settled by hate. It is only settled by love. This is an eternal truth. Others don't understand that here we need to be restrained. But those who do understand this, being clever, settle their conflicts. Breakers of bones and takers of life, thieves of cattle, horses, and wealth, those who plunder the nation, even they can come together, so why on earth can't you? If you find an alert companion, a wise and virtuous friend, then overcoming all adversities, wander with them, joyful and mindful. If you find no alert companion, no wise and virtuous friend, then like a king who flees his conquered realm, wander alone like a tusker in the wilds. It is better to wander alone. There is no fellowship with fools. Wander alone and do no wrong, at ease like a tusker in the wilds. So these are these famous verses, and you will find them in the Dhammapada. I always recommend people to read the Dhammapada a little bit, because the Dhammapada has many verses like this. These are some of the most famous ones, but there are many other very inspiring verses there. And sometimes, before you go to bed at night, just read a couple of verses in the Dhammapada. Yeah, especially if you have a long, busy day, if you are a disciple and you have a long, busy day, sometimes you need a bit of Dhamma just before you go to sleep, just to kind of keep your mind sane among all the problems of the world. And this inspires you. Then you sleep well, and when you sleep well, you wake up in the morning, you have energy, and you have all the good qualities come from that. So let's have a look at these verses. When many voices shout at once, no one thinks that they are a fool. Yeah? This is what we are seeing here. We're seeing the monks acting foolishly, even in the presence of the Buddha. They don't know when to shut up, and just kind of do the right thing. And so everyone thinks they're right. And then, even if the Sangha is being split, this is Sangha Beda. Sangha Beda is the schism in the Sangha. Even then, you don't actually think to listen to anyone else. You don't think that anyone else is better or anyone else has a better idea. You are still foolishly holding on to your own ideas, even when kind of great, really bad things happen, like the Sangha being split. This is considered very serious in Buddhism, and you may know that this is one of the Anantarika, I never get that word right, Anantarika Dhammas, one of these things, or kammas, whereby you have an immediate bad rebirth in your immediate existence afterwards. The splitting of the Sangha is very, very serious thing. It's only a bhikkhu that can split the Sangha, but if you do that, the effects are really, really bad. And of course, the reason why it is bad, because you're losing the Dhamma in a sense. You're splitting up, You're no longer access to the same Dhamma. You're dividing up in the world. And instead of working together in harmony, you start arguing and you're creating all kinds of divisions and problems in the world. You no longer have the same Buddha unifying the whole Sangha as it should be. So this is, for that reason, considered very bad, has very severe consequences. And also very difficult to be a lay disciple. If you see the Sangha is being split, what do you do as a lay disciple? It's very difficult to make choices. Where should you go? Where should you have your faith? What should you do? It's very difficult. And in the Kusambhaka Khandaka, in the Vinaya Pitaka, the Buddha actually gives advice to the lay people and to everyone what to do when the Sangha is split, where to go, who to side with, as part of the advice in that particular Khandaka. So it's kind of interesting in that sense as well. Then dolts pretending to be astute. Dolts is like a foolish person. Astute, pretending to be wise. They talk the words right out of bounds. Not understanding right speech and wrong speech. They blab at will, their mouths agape. The mouth's open. Sometimes better to shut your mouth. When the mouth is open, bad things come out sometimes. So sometimes just tape your mouth shut and don't say anything. If you feel a bit miserable and grumpy in the morning, then come out with your mouth taped together, and then you are safe. No, I'm just joking. It's just metaphorically speaking. You know what I mean. And no one knows what leads them on. You lose sense of what actually drives you. You get driven by all of these external circumstances. You're no longer driven by good intentions. You forget what actually is really going on inside of you. And that is always a dangerous moment. You basically lose your mindfulness. You lose your right view. You lose your sense of direction. And this is what happens in these kind of situations. And then come the verses that are very famous. All of these are famous, but these are perhaps very often recited. They abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those who bear such a grudge, hatred never ends. Usually in the world, if someone abuses you, let alone if they hit you or they robbed you, we tend to become upset. We tend to bear a grudge. We tend to take this with you into the future. And whenever you remember this, that grudge, that ill will or whatever comes back up again, because you remember this thing from the past and you carry it with you into the future. But if you do that, the hatred, the anger, the ill will, the resentment, the fault finding, the irritation, it never comes to an end if you carry on with this. This is the problem with these things. So even though other people do bad things towards us, it is not the right attitude to have ill will towards that person, to have anger. And this is kind of very interesting. So this is why the second verse then comes out. And the second verse is, they abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those who bear no such grudge, hatred does have an end. And so what this means is that abuse even being hit, being robbed. This is something that happens to everyone in the world. You will always have people who abuse you. You will always have people who act in the wrong way towards you. This is not really negotiable. This is guaranteed to happen in life. Yeah? And because it is guaranteed to happen in life, we have to find a way of dealing with this. The wrong way of dealing with these things is trying to always avoid it. Because if you always try to avoid it, you're trying the impossible. You will not always be able to avoid this. Yeah, speech in the world is very difficult. People have their own problems, they have their own dukkha, they have all of these things happening. The world is always in turmoil. There's so many problems in the world. Of course, people are going to say the wrong thing. Of course, they're going to react to all the difficult conditions in their life. This is to be expected. And sometimes they will do really bad things, like they will steal, or they will even use violence, like physical violence. Yeah, this is part and parcel of life. Life, unfortunately, is like this. But there is a choice. We can choose to react to these difficult things in a good way or the bad way. And the bad way to react to these things is to remember this and to carry on, to bear a grudge, and then bring that hatred into the future. Instead, what we have to do is we have to let go of these things. We have to learn how to look at these things in such a way that we don't carry any grudge or any hatred into the future. And this is the beautiful thing about the Buddha's message, that it shows us how to deal with these difficult situations so we don't carry any grudge into the future. We can let go of these things. We can forgive completely. And even when we think back at that situation, we don't actually have any hatred in our heart anymore. This is the power of these teachings. The choice is how we react to these things. These things are inevitable, so our choice is only in how we react. So how can we learn to react in the right way? And this comes back again to the idea of right view. If you have the right view about what people are like, if you have the right view about what the world is like, it is actually possible to react always in the right way, even in these very difficult situations. Many of you, probably all of you, know the simile of the saw. You have the simile of the saw, the Kakachupama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 21. And the simile of the saw sets the bar even higher. It sets the bar to the very highest, almost possible, thinkable, level, in a sense, where the Buddha says that even if bandits kind of pin you to the ground and saw you limb from limb, you're only supposed to have metta and karuna for those bandits. And when people read that, they think you must be joking. Yeah, the Buddha, please Buddha, you're asking too much. Ask anything, but don't ask this. This is impossible. And of course, the Buddha is not joking. The Buddha is serious about that. And he says it because it is possible. Not only is it possible for the Buddha, not only is it possible for the Arahants, but it's possible for everyone to do this if you train your mind long enough in the right direction. This is the same thing we're seeing here, but even more extreme in a sense. So how do we do this? And I will come to one of the suttas that explain this in great detail later on. But it comes from the idea, again, that we are conditioned beings. We are not independent. We are not autonomous. We are not individuals who can stand our ground in the context of all the conditions and things that work on us. We don't have the ability to withstand all the conditions of the world because we are form. We are the sum of those conditions that have worked on us. Our conditioning, that is what our habits in this life. This is what our personality is. Our personality is all of these conditions come together. And if I tell you to step outside of your personality, you think I'm nuts. And I don't deny that maybe I'm a bit nuts, but I'm not that nuts. So you cannot step out of your personality. We are trapped by our personality. Our personality has been formed by our past in this life and in previous lives. And now we are what we are. A bit up and down, a bit changeable all the time. But there's certain traits that actually are built into us. And because those traits are built into us, we will act them out. And very often we have no choice. If I ask you to never think angry thought for the next week, you probably won't be able to do that. Maybe some of you are, because some of you are pretty impressive. But generally speaking, it's very rare in the world to find people who never had any angry thought, never have the slightest irritation for even an hour, let alone 7 days. So we cannot expect people to always do the right thing. What we can expect people is to play out, live out the cause and conditions. The idea, again, is that people are really more like robots. Yeah? They're following a program. That program is the conditioning from the past. And you must expect a robot to play out that program. They have no choice. And sometimes that program will be played out in your presence. And when they play out the wrong program or the bad program in your presence, you will be the recipient of abuse, of violence, of what have you, whatever is kind of happening in that program at that time. But you also know that when that person is playing out that program inside of them, they probably don't want that. Probably this person wants to be kind. The reason why they want to be kind is because they know, I think everyone knows deep down, that kindness is what we want to do, because we know that kindness is largely equivalent to happiness. When you are kind to someone, you feel good about yourself. Yeah, we know that kindness and happiness often always go together. And so we would like to be kind at all times, but we cannot be kind. And so when you see another person acting in the wrong way, even though deep down they probably want to be kind, but because of the conditioning they can't do it, the right response is always compassion. Here is a person who is trapped. Here is someone who is imprisoned by their past, imprisoned by their habits. They cannot really change. And the moment you see that moment you have compassion. So if you have a problem with your parents, if you have a problem that you get into stupid little arguments or whatever, remember that they are trapped. You are also trapped by your conditioning. And when you see that little argument starting to come about, at that moment, remember it's a trap. And then at that moment you will have compassion both for your parents and for yourself, both for the person you're with and yourself, whoever that is, because you understand that this is the nature of samsara. There is no self. And when there is no self, there is nothing that can withstand the conditions that are inside and outside. And we have to go along with those conditions. Compassion arises when you see that, because you understand how difficult it often is, and you understand the urgency of getting out of this conditioning, because it is so profound and so difficult. So this is how you need to think. And this is actually how the Suttas recommend us to think. We will come to this later on, but I'm already now kind of giving a preview, if you like. I'm going to repeat myself a lot, which I like. I like to repeat myself because that means I get to hear it many times, because I need to hear it as well. So I say it again and again and again. If you think I repeat myself a lot on this retreat, this is only one retreat for me. Yeah, imagine how many retreats I do. And every time I hear these things, actually, I find it really inspiring, and it reminds me, everyone needs to be reminded what is the right thing to do now. So this is how you need to think, but don't just listen to this when you come on retreat. Don't just listen to what I have to say, because the way I think about this may not gel 100% with you. You will have to find your own way of making sense of this, yeah? These are just the basic ideas, the basic idea of non-self, the basic idea of conditioning in the world. Yeah, that idea, those ideas are a given. We can all agree on that. Then how you apply that for yourself, you have to find out. So reflect on these things. One of the things that the Buddha always says in the Suttas is that you listen to the Dhamma, you hear what the wise people have to say, and then you reflect. Yeah. You don't just stop right there. What does this mean? What does it mean for me? How does it apply to my life? Yeah? How do I use these teachings in a practical way, down to earth, to make a better life for myself? When you do that, these things become really, really powerful for you. And then as you develop these things in this way, you start to see them more clearly. Initially, when I say these things, you may think, yeah, okay, it kind of makes sense. But it doesn't really bite in a deep way. But as you make these things your own teachings, as you start to gain really powerful confidence in this, you start to see them in a different way. They start to have a very powerful effect on your life. That's when they become powerful. But the only way to do that is to recondition your mind. And this is why the idea in the Suttas about developing the sanya is so powerful. This is what we're doing right now. We're developing sanya. Yeah? Sanya is the perception of having compassion for people when they do the wrong thing. Having the perception of people as not a self, but as a conditioned phenomenon. Yeah? As being trapped in the conditionality. All of these things are development of perceptions. We're learning to see people, learning to see the world in a new way. But it takes a long time for perceptions to change. And that's why you have to do it again and again and again, gradually turning your mind in a different direction until one day, actually, you are looking at things in a very different way. And these things work. Yeah? Don't think that these things don't work. These things are really, really powerful. And over time, you do change. I'm sometimes surprised. Sometimes I feel like I haven't practiced hard enough in this life. But at other times I can also see that after being a monk, I've been a monk for almost 30 years now, getting close to 30 years. And I can see the changes in my mind over those 30 years. And I'm a far more kind of reasonable person now than I was 30 years ago. If you saw me 30 years ago, you might be scared. Whoa, this person is scary. These days, I'm not so scary anymore, fortunately. So this is kind of the beauty of these things. They actually do work. They do change you over time. And many of you who have done this for a long time, you will be aware of this. You will know that this is actually how it works. But you have to apply yourself. And the more faith you have in the ability of these things to change you, the more you will apply yourself in the right way. This is part of what I mean by developing the perceptions. In this way, eventually, even if someone beats you, even if they abuse you, instead of thinking that this is against me, you will have compassion for the other person, because you know they are the one who have the problem. Okay, you have to bear a little bit of suffering, but it's only a small little bit of suffering right now. If you don't carry it with you into the future, it will be gone very soon. But the other person, they have a long-term problem because of the way they act. They are the ones who deserve compassion. So again, these are some of the ways to think about these things. To overcome all kinds of problems with anger and heatedness and ill will in life. This is kind of how you do it. It takes time. You have to keep on developing this. But it is surprisingly powerful, and I think you will start to find that this works already fairly soon as you start to apply these things. Okay, then comes this next verse, also very famous. For never is hatred settled by hate. It is only settled by non-hate, avera, or love, if you like. This is an eternal truth. So sometimes we think that if someone hates us, we have to be harsh back. And if we are harsh back, then somehow that will work. But of course, it never really works. Because if you are harsh back, if you are angry back at someone who is angry, if you use violence against someone who is violent, if you kind of apply the same kind of measure back, then that just reinforces the other person's view that they were right to be angry in the first place. They are angry, their anger becomes justified because you are acting in a bad way. So the best way to deal with anger is always to remain cool. Don't have to say anything. Often saying anything is counterproductive, but just to remain cool and to have a sense of compassion. That's what the Buddha did. You see that in the suttas. And often it was very powerful when the Buddha did that. And very often what happens if someone else is cool and you are angry, you become a bit self-conscious. Whoop, what's happening? Maybe I have a problem, right? Because if the other person is completely cool, that is not an expected reaction. You start to look at yourself instead. And this is kind of the power of being cool in those kind of situations. Anyway, it's a beautiful saying. Hatred is never settled by hate, or anger is never settled by anger. Violence is never settled by violence. Remain cool. Have metta, have compassion. That's how everything in this world is sorted out. Others don't understand that here we need to be restrained. But for those who do understand this, being clever they settle their conflicts. Sometimes you just have to hold back. Sometimes maybe you do get a little bit upset inside. Don't let it out. Leave it inside. Try to overcome it. Try to turn it into compassion instead. Hold back. In the beginning, we have to learn to hold back. And eventually, also, we allow the mind to change completely, and we have compassion instead. You are clever. You settle your conflicts because you don't actually engage in these kind of things. And then you can see the Buddha is a little bit exasperated with his monks, a little bit disappointed perhaps. He says that even all these criminals, the breakers of bones, the taker of lives, the thieves, those who plunder the nation, even they can work together. So why can't you? Why on earth can't you? So he's not really happy with his monks, obviously, and for good reason. And then you have these other beautiful verses at the very end here. If you find an alert companion, a wise and virtuous friend, then overcoming all adversities, wander with them, joyful and mindful. The alert companion is the Nipaka companion, I think. Wise and virtuous, probably here the Pandita or something like that. I can't remember the exact Pali words. Virtuous, Silavant or something. I can't remember. Pali is not. I can't remember the Pali. But you get the idea. Someone who has all the right kind of qualities. And when you have a person of those kind of qualities, well, then you have the Kalyanamitta. This is what the Kalyanamitta is. Someone who, when you are with them, they actually improve you as a person. You become better by being in their presence. That is the real Kalyanamitta. And as long as you are not ready to go into complete solitude, as long as you are not proficient in the jhanas and these kind of things, it is good to hang around with Kalyanamittas. It is very useful. I have always found in my monastic life that, when I hang around with someone like Ajahn Brahmali, I tend to become a better person. I'm just sitting next. Sometimes I don't have to say anything. I kind of go up and just kind of go to see Ajahn Brahmali. I just kind of go up and I feel a bit miserable or whatever, And then I go up and I just sit down next to him. Maybe I have a cup of tea or something. Sometimes I don't say anything at all. And maybe I say, good evening, Ajahn, or something like, just hi, hello, Ajahn, whatever. Don't say anything, just sit down. Just sitting next to him for 10 minutes is enough. Then I can walk away and go back to my kuti, And you feel kind of relaxed afterwards. Because there's something about someone who is very peaceful and they have a natural kindness that just kind of, you absorb that feeling in a sense. You absorb the vibe. There's a vibe about it, if you know what I mean. This idea of vibes is actually I think there's a lot of truth to the idea of vibes. When I was in the United States not so long ago, they told me that vibes is no longer the right word. The right word is juju. You have to have the right juju. Juju is kind of the modern word for vibe. So I started going around saying juju everywhere. It was kind of nice. You have to be an up-to-date monk. You have to be the cool monk. So then you kind of really things go in there. So the juju, the vibe, is actually palpable around some people, and that's why it's nice to hang out with them. You stay with them. You feel good as a consequence. You relax. You feel a sense of warmth inside. You feel all the good feelings, and that's actually very, very useful. So this is what Kalyanamittas are about. But then when you hang out with the wrong people, you get the kind of negative vibes, and it affects you in a bad way, because of their speech, because of their mind, and all of these kind of things. So it's very important to choose Kalyanamittas in your life. So make sure that you hang out with the right kind of people. Choose your friends carefully. It doesn't mean that you reject everyone else. Sometimes we have to be with other people as well. But it means that your majority companions, the ones that you're mostly with, are good people with the right qualities, the right values, and all of these kind of things. It does have a very powerful effect on us. And even just reading the suttas can have that effect if we kind of get into the right mood by hanging out with the Buddha, so to speak. If you find no alert companion, no wise and virtuous friend, then like the king who flees his conquered realm, wander alone like a tusker in the wilds. When your realm is conquered, well, you have no choice. The king has to leave because he doesn't have a realm anymore. His realm is now gone. And then you become like the tusker. The tusker is like the elephant, the kind of the big elephant who wander alone away from the herd. This is what you see sometimes in the suttas, the kind of big elephants that just want to be by themselves. They don't want to kind of have too many other elephants around, and they find that annoying when there are too many other elephants around. In the same way, you wander alone when you have all the right qualities and you are ready for wandering by yourself. It is better to wander alone. There is no fellowship with fools. Wander alone and do no wrong, at ease like a tusker in the wilds. So very beautiful verses, very powerful, and so this gives you kind of some very high-minded ideas about the Dhamma, about how to live your life in the right way, about what to do. And some of these very simple things, when you read them like here, they can be hard to understand exactly what these things mean. And that's why it is so nice to be able to draw out the meaning of these verses and to explain how you actually do these kind of things. And then it is up to you to put these things into practice. And as you do, I can guarantee you that you will get very good results as a consequence. So that is all for now. So please keep on enjoying yourself. Have a nice lunch. And then we will see you back again at 4 o'clock this afternoon.